And welcome to another episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And today we have some amazing guests for you guys. And as you guys know, we have been doing a special segment this month and where we're talking to couples who have lost children. And today's guests, Nancy and Dan Loeffler, they have come to share their story with us and tell about their journey as well. Now, before we get started, I will like to say that this is for educational purposes only. If this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, without further ado, my guests are already here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and we're going to go from there. If you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. Nancy, Dan, how you guys doing today?
Well, good. Well, good, Tony. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so I want to take a minute and let you guys introduce yourself and tell people where you're from.
Sounds good.
Great. I'm Nancy Loeffler. We are currently in St. Paul, Minnesota, where it's snowing right now.
And we host a radio program here in St. Paul that talks about having difficult conversations. It's called Monday Morning Conversations. And appropriate that here we are on Monday. And having difficult conversations is something that, because of our grief journey, we had to figure out and navigate that without any real help. And I think that was part of our story that is contains the nugget of where I think we'll go today. So we're looking forward to, having this. Our story began 23 years ago.
23 years ago.
Although we've been together much longer than that.
Now, our story doesn't begin there. Our grief journey. Our
grief.
Well,
we're gonna have to talk about the secret to that because I'm still trying to figure this thing out, right? Let's talk about your journey. We've talked about it, and like I said, very difficult conversation to have, right?
Right.
But it's one that can shed a lot of light on what people go through, couples, men and women both, how we perceive these losses. And of course, it's a very, very taboo subject, very touchy as well, sensitive. Child loss. Let's talk about your journey.
Okay. Well, as Dan said, it was 23 years ago. In November of 2000, then 17-year-old daughter, Leah, died from injuries that she sustained in a car accident. And so she was a senior in high school. She was on her way to school, and she somehow lost control of the vehicle and hit a tree, the only tree in the middle of a cornfield. Mm. And so I received a message at work, and Dan and I were each working in different locations, of course. And they wouldn't tell me what had happened. They just said they were escorting me. The police were escorting me to the hospital. So I had no idea what happened. I had the presence of mind to call Dan, who was working nearby, and he met us on the road somewhere, and there was a police officer in the car that I was in that got out and drove his car. And so we drove to the hospital. Wow, that's a part of the story that I don't often think of. We drove to the hospital, and when we got there, we were met by Leah's principal and her guidance counselor, and who then told us about the accident and that she was in surgery. So we called our son. He was in college at the time, and he joined us there, and we had this vigil in the hospital of not knowing anything really until she came out of surgery, and she had massive brain injuries, and they had put her in an induced coma because of that, because she had brain swelling. And so we started letting people know about it, and her friends and our friends began arriving at the hospital, wanting to know what was going on. And so we had a pretty full house there at the hospital in the waiting room for quite a few days.
Yeah, and give you a little backstory. So 17, she got her license and had it less than a year, and we had gone out doing the practice, driver's ed, prep work that you do, and even took both our son and our daughter out on icy conditions, and showed them how to correct when you're steering into a slick spot. And our routine at the time, because we were both working, was that one of us would stay home and rap on the door. Are you up yet? And it's time to start your day. And that day happened to be my day, where I knocked on the door and went through the motions and, are you up? And yeah, I'm up. Okay, well, I'm going to be going here. I want to make sure you're set for your day. And of course, this happened to be homecoming weekend. And it was that Friday before, the dance on Saturday, and a lot of things going on in her head probably, but that's one of the questions. You never know just what happened. And then to get that phone call that Nancy mentioned, and arrive at the hospital with the big question mark of, well, is she going to be okay?
And so as the days went on, she really didn't. She would make a little bit of progress, and then she'd regress, and she'd make a little bit more, and then she'd regress. And on about the fourth or fifth day, they came to us and said, we really don't think she's going to return to us. We really don't think that she's going to regain brain activity. And they gave us a bunch of reasons why, which, if I ever knew what they were, I certainly don't remember them at this point. And they began to talk to us about organ donation, which was like a real
surprise, because
that's the last thing you expect to hear when your daughter is fighting for their lives. And yet, if someone had offered, if it was possible, and someone had offered a brain transplant, we would have been the first ones to say yes. So because she had the organ donor sign on her driver's license, we did honor her wishes, and she did become an organ donor. But it was just another layer upon layer upon layer of complications. So we had to make the decision to remove life support, even though we couldn't remove life support because her organs needed to be maintained. So it was a real struggle for us. It was in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. or something on the day.
And let me preface that remark. The day, that morning when we had arrived at the hospital, parked in the parking structure and second or third level. And as we went to the stairwell to head downstairs to enter the hospital, there was a little sparrow in the stairwell that was trapped and fluttering around. And I opened the door to see it and held the door open and said, "Little sparrow, you can fly away." Neither of us realized what was to come that day. And our little sparrow flew.
I think at some level we each knew what that meant. We couldn't speak it in that moment, and I still remember the feeling of that as I was sitting at her bedside, recalling that incident.
So there began our journey into the unimaginable and uncharted territory of grief.
Yeah, and that's a really hard way to get introduced to it, right? You're going straight to the deepest of them, which is child loss.
Right.
And we all know that that's a territory that no one wants to be a part of, right? That's a community that doesn't even have a name because of the depth of the pain
Yeah.
that's involved in it.
Yeah.
Now, I guess my first question would be, in that moment, I mean, you guys already talked about the sparrow, right? And unspoken words. You both know what, as you said, you both knew what that meant. So, take me back to the moment where you realized that she was gone, because we all experience it in different ways, right? Is the shock, the disbelief, all of those things I know that are associated with it. Like I said, we've talked before, and I know, well, I have a better understanding from my perspective. I don't know from your perspective.
Right,
So,
right.
as a couple, you're both the parents. You just lost a child,
Yeah.
So, Nancy, I'll start with you, and I'll ask that question. What's going on through your head at that moment, and then I'll get over to you and ask you the same question.
Well, when I realized that she really wasn't coming back to us, I had no idea how I was going to get from that moment to the next moment, let alone continue my life.
Right.
I had no idea how my life was going to continue. That was my first thought. I can't let this happen. I can't let this happen. I need to, and I don't know how I can go on.
And I guess for my perspective on that, or my recollection, to see her broken body, with her head shaved, and her, she prided herself on her hair, and the things that make each of us special. That was one of her,
Her pride and joy.
Yeah,
her hair, doing things with her hair.
I can remember getting down close to her and whispering, "We would love to have you back, but if you need to go, it's okay."
Yeah.
Hardest thing I've ever had to say.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how. And I didn't know the impact of what those words would mean to either of us.
Yeah.
Going forward. And I know that I was just totally unprepared. I had lost parents at that point, and grandparents, but like you said, there's a special category that just cannot be described with a loss of a child. And I struggled. I had none of the tools that Nancy had, and she can talk about those, but I floundered. The first thing I wanted to do was pack everything up in a package and stick it in the back of the closet, and not have to deal with it until that became so loud and demanded my attention, because I was headed down a path that was unhealthy for the two of us and unhealthy personally. So it was just unimaginable. And like I said, we were in a territory that had no roadmap and no way to figure out how to get to the other side.
Yeah.
Right.
And wow, that's deep. Because I'm listening to both of you, and Dan, I'm going along this journey with you, and it just reminds me of the path that I went on when after I lost my son as well, right? It's just a strong reminder that we're not alone on this journey, even though we've experienced it. we've experienced it in our own ways. And it now leads me to my next question, because I look at both of you now. You guys are still together, and I've talked to many people, men and women alike, who have gone through similar things, and the relationship did not last, right?
Yeah.
Because child loss, it's easy to point the finger, blame each other, and men and women both. We can be hard on each other, and which causes that division. So,
Yeah.
how did you guys manage to keep your relationship together? I know it had to be challenging. And I think we talked about it before, and I just want to shed a little bit of light on it, because I don't think a lot of people really understand what it takes to stay together without turning each other's head off, and things like that, right? And it probably came close, right? Probably got in arguments and everything else, but maybe not. So let's shed some light on it a little bit for me, please.
Yeah, well, it could have gone either way. Now, there was a point where it definitely could have gone either way. And for us, it was a conscious, intentional decision well, first of all, let me say that when our lives were shadowed by grief, it illuminated all the parts of our marriage that needed help, all the parts in our life, parts in my life, the parts in Dan's life, the parts in our marriage collectively, the parts as parents. And after we got to a certain point in our grief journey where we could actually share some of these things with each other, that took quite a while. We had a decision to make. Do we want to do the work necessary to go into those places that were illuminated to us, the places that needed some attention, the places that needed work? And we sat with that for almost a year before we said, yes, we do. And so then that was just the first decision. Then it took another 2 years before we were ready to recommit to each other, which would have been a good rite of passage. We happened to be on vacation in Cozumel, and we recommitted to each other at sunrise on the beach. And so it was, but it took us 3 years to get to that point from when we first said, okay, we are at a certain point in our grief journey. We know that's going to continue. Do I want to do what it takes to heal myself and then heal our marriage? And my answer was yes.
Okay. And see, Cozumel is a good place to do it. I've been there. Love the beach. Done some swimming out there. Won't do that again, right? Too many sharks. Definitely too many sharks. I was like, oh no. That it was a lot of fun, and I'm thankful that you guys have done it, and sharing that brief insight into what it takes and the time, because I think a lot of people get confused that it's supposed to happen overnight, and it doesn't, right? Grief is one of those things. Take your time and process it, individually, and then coming back together. And I wish that for anyone who's ever gone through that something horrible like that, with losing a child.
Well, now, I think no matter what the decision is, because a couple may decide not to stay together, and that doesn't mean that that's the wrong decision for them.
Right, and that's true. Yeah. That's very, very true. And I've seen it. I've seen it on both ends, right? I have a really good friend. Him and his wife were similar to you guys. Did the same thing, went apart, and came back together and decided, hey, this is the way that it's going to be. We're going to have to work at it. But if it's going to work, we have to be able to, express what we're going through. Whereas on the other end, I've seen bitter ends on both sides, right? Whereas no, she did this, and no, he did that, and which causes division. And some of them just went, you know what, this is just better this way. So I've seen the multiple facets of when couples stay together or fall apart after something like this. Now moving forward, how did your relationships with friends and family change, right? Because everybody who's been involved with you, also had that relationship as well, even though it's more personable to you guys. how did you have support? How did those relationships change along the way?
Well, it's interesting because the first thing that comes to mind was the community where we were living at the time. And we were part of a Catholic community.
Okay.
And yet, when we entered the church and sat in our typical and usual spot, there was nobody around us. No one knew how to react to, there's the couple that have lost their daughter. Right. And one of the things that Nancy wrote about was that grief is not contagious. And it seemed like the people in the church were fearful that, oh, it might happen to them. And yet,
or they just didn't know what to say, which is understandable.
Yeah. Right. What do you say to somebody who's lost a child? And yet there were people who did reach out to us, friends that, so this happened at the beginning of November. Before we knew it, Thanksgiving was there, and we were invited because we weren't going to celebrate Thanksgiving. We had nothing to be thankful for at that particular moment.
We thought at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. And yet we were invited to a neighbor's, home who took care of us. And the folks who we worked with, the day of the funeral, showed up. We had people washing our car. We had people raking our leaves, people bringing groceries, bringing food,
making us breakfast.
And there was a great outpouring of support. And, of course, our families who lived,
out of state,
hours away.
They all came in.
Yeah, they all were there to support us. And even that first Christmas, which was its own trial, because none of the things that worked before were going to work again. We found that we couldn't celebrate the same way. And it took us a long time to be able to embrace that Christmas spirit.
Yeah.
So,
but that first Christmas, your mom and sister came out to celebrate with us. So
we went through the motions, but
we went through the motions.
it was rather empty and hollow because.
Well, we also invited Leah's friends to come over and decorate the tree because, again, we weren't going to be doing that, and it helped to have Leah's friends together in that kind of solidarity at that time.
And I guess that was one of the things that we found too, that and I think that helped us on our path of opening up to younger folks who had no experience of a loss of that magnitude. They may have lost a pet or may have lost a friend who moved away, but not a classmate. And they were and remain 23 years later thankful that we shared that time with them in such an intimate way, opening our house at Christmas, inviting them into her room to say goodbye to her.
Okay.
In the hospital.
In the hospital.
When we knew that it was imminent. Yeah.
We just felt that was an appropriate way of sharing the grief that we felt.
And including them in, they had been in the hospital 5 days that they loved her, that they cared for her, and we wanted to give her them the opportunity to say goodbye if they so chose, and everybody did.
And I love that you brought that up, because I've always wondered now, and I'm already talking from a similar experience. My son was 8 when he passed, right? And so a lot of his classmates, as a matter of fact, I remember talking to one of the parents, the little girl, I remember them coming to me one time before he passed away. It was like, we just want to meet our future, brother-in-law and things like that. I'm like, what? They were like, yeah, because them two is going to end up together. And I think they were around six or so, very young, right? Yeah. And two together, the daughter was Hispanic, my son is mixed. And so they're inseparable, right? And you would think that, they were best of friends, but no, they had a thing going on. They just try to hide it and stuff like that. I'm like, boy, you can't hide nothing. We see you, right? And so the parents, we used to just joke around. The one thing that broke my heart, that really, really broke my heart, and I'm glad that you brought up the friends and things like that. When my son passed away, the parents came to me, and first off, they gave me a hug. The little girl came up to me and said, he will be missed. He will be missed. And I love him with all my heart. Now, this girl is nothing but 8 years old. Like I said, they've been knowing each other since they were 6, 8 years old. And this is what she's saying. So fast forward, a couple of years later, I just started, I started my personal training company. A client of mine knew them. And I saw the little girl when she was my son would have been 16 this year. I think she was around 12. So 4 years later, and you would think as a child, we don't remember these things, right? And so this lets me know how children grieve. Mm-hmm. The little girl saw me. First thing she does, drops her bags, runs up to me, gives me this big old hug. Mm-hmm. And what broke my heart was she reaches in her pocket and she pulls out a picture of her and my son. Mm-hmm. And she says, just so you know, I still remember him. Mm-hmm. And I still love him. Wow. And I broke down.
Yeah.
Now, unlike you guys, I couldn't celebrate Christmas anymore. I couldn't celebrate New Year's, because my son was born December 18th, right? And Christmas is right there. New Year's is right there. He's always been with me. So needless to say, it took me a long time to look at the holidays the same. And I still don't. I still have a hard time, right? But I've learned. Right. I've learned to celebrate with other people and go, hey, I wish you a happy Christmas and all of these things. And it's not putting on a fake face, because I am really genuinely, thankful for them. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad to hear that you guys had that support and everything like that. So which leads me to my next question. How long was it before you guys decided to say, let's do something with this to help other people, educate them as well?
Yeah, it was a long time. It was a long time. Yeah. It was probably about 14 years into it.
Okay.
And I kept getting these. The message that I received shortly after she died was that losing Leah is too high a price to not live the life I was meant to live. So my grief journey became about excavating that life and trying to figure out what that was. So I also kept getting these messages saying that someday you'll be helping people navigate through grief in a way that nobody else is. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what to do with that. But I was eventually called to put together a body of work of everything that worked for me, including gratitude, including self-care, specifically what does self-care look like when you're grieving. And the main thing that helped me was a practice called samyama, which helped me to be with the pain of losing my daughter in each moment. So it taught present moment awareness and how to be in that present moment, and allowed my heart to hold all of those feelings. So I put together a body of work that incorporated those and other things that I had learned in other trainings, and immediately started seeing clients, started receiving clients to help them on the navigate their grief. And so that was about 14 years in. And then from there, I was guided to write my book. And again, when I first started, I thought, okay, I'm leading the life I was meant to live. I'm helping others navigate through grief. That gives me meaning and purpose.
Okay.
And so when I received the message that it was time to write the book, I resisted that big time,
Yes.
until it was easier to write it instead of continuing to resist it, because I thought, I'm not an author. Who am I to think that I have someone to offer someone else? And yet, after I wrote the book, the words kind of just flew out of my
Through me.
hands, through me, yeah. And I was so the book's been published now for 7 years. And I did a whole bunch of book events before COVID, and I was thinking, oh, it might be time to start that again. So that's what it was for me.
And what's the name of your book?
The Alchemy of Grief: Your Journey to Wholeness.
And where can people find that?
On Amazon.
On Amazon. And then the same thing, or was your experience a little bit different?
Yeah, quite a bit different. I mean, we both grieve totally separately,
Right.
well, until we did come together to, and I remember, even though we didn't begin the grief work right away, we did consciously want to do something in terms of establishing either a memorial or it's turned into this body of work that we talk about having difficult conversations, because it's something that is considered taboo, and no one really wants to delve into the sticky mess that grief brings to the bubbles to the surface. So from my perspective, like I said, I put it on the shelf in the back of my mental closet, and didn't want to deal with it. Tried to go back to work. I was going to be the strong, or at least I thought, I've got to be strong for the family. I've got to, shoulder it, and but it was grinding me down, and work lost its meaning. I was struggling there. I wanted help, but I didn't know how. And let me go back to where we were talking a bit before about the decision to stay together. We've been together 51 years since high school. And the night I met Nancy, I went home to my mom and I said, "That's the girl I'm going to marry." And my mom said, "Get out of here, go to bed. You're dreaming." And yet what that meant for me was that she brought out the best in me.
Right.
And she also helped point me in the direction of finding some help. and I did. I talked to a therapist, a man who gave me permission to open up about the content of my heart that I wasn't able to express even to myself. And that led me on the beginning of the work that I feel is important, which, and I know this is a place in your heart, talking to men about the things that are going on in their life.
Yeah.
It led me to begin men's work. And what that meant for me was becoming more comfortable with talking to men about the things that got deeper than the surface water cooler talk. And, hey, did you see that game? And, oh, what kind of car do you drive? All of the stuff that we use as fillers that don't really get to the heart of what it is to be a guy in a world that can be confusing, can be, upsetting, and just gave me a place to begin the path to my inner healing.
Right.
So, and I got her to thank for it.
See, I think that's beautiful, man. I definitely think that's beautiful. And thank you for the work that you're doing as well. And Nancy, you as well, because it's so important. Dan, you and I both know, what I'm saying, when it comes down to men, we live in a world that's very judgmental, right? We get told, hey, men don't do this, men don't do that. And the challenges that we face moving forward, and trying to open up, trying to find people that we can feel secure and vulnerable around in a space that's specifically for us. The biggest thing, I used to get men to tell me, well, what if it gets leaked out? What if someone finds out what I say? I wonder what they're going to think about me. I go, look, that's the reason why we signed the NDA, right? You know what I'm saying? What we see in the group stays in the group. If it gets leaked out or I find out those person no longer in the group, but you know what I'm saying? This is a space for us. And I understand, because I was that guy, right? You know what I'm saying? You put me in a space around other people, the first thing I'm thinking is, as soon as I hear someone say something about, outside the group about what I just said, we're going to have to fight. Typical male talk. We're going to have to fight. Oh, man, it's not that way. I'm like, just saying, like, don't make me do it. But, as much as it sounds like I wasn't joking, man. I was dead serious. Anybody find out, I'm gonna punch you in the mouth, right? Mm-hmm. And now, you guys, you got the book wrote, you got the organization going, and things like that. How are you starting to navigate this new life that you've just now built, and the impact that you're having on people, because you guys have been doing it for quite some time now, right?
Yeah.
And the show that you do, let's talk a little bit about that as well. Because I love the concept of having difficult conversations. That's what we do all the time. What started you wanting to have those difficult conversations?
Well, it really fell into our lap about a year ago. We started it at the end of January last year, and it was someone that we had recently moved to St. Paul from Raleigh, and we had a connection. Somebody that Dan knew from the grief recovery method knew someone who lived here and connected us with them, and we started talking with them, and they said, hey, you should go check out Frogtown Radio. They're looking for people to do shows. Mm-hmm. So Dan called the guy, and I'll let you take it from there.
But to take a step back, what really gave us the idea for the show was our Sunday morning conversations on this couch, having a cup of coffee and saying, hey, I was thinking about, or I had this dream, or What about
What about this aspect of grief? And actually, to take it a step further, we actually, the year before we had the radio show, we did our own webinar
Okay.
of
Okay.
talking, called it Changing the Conversation Around Grief. It was a membership site and it had marginal success, but that wasn't what was important to us. It was important to us having the conversations. And then when we had the offer of the radio show, it just seemed seamless because we had already been having the conversations. We had a whole year of topics already in the bag, and we could have guests. So, yeah, we had a first show of the new year this morning, and it just feels really good to be able to talk about all aspects of grief. And we've had people on from estate attorneys to funeral directors who are envisioning new kinds of funerals to grief support for a variety of different things, from
pet support,
pets, yeah,
loss of pet
grief, stillbirth, what happens when your friends move away, or the friendship changes in some way. I mean, we've had so many people on what happens when you're facing old age and you don't feel old. We had a conversation with someone about that, and it was just, we've had some really great conversations. So we feel blessed to be able to introduce other people to our guests as well.
Yeah, and the audience responds. So we even had a show about grief of the world, and
Yeah.
And that's probably my favorite show because we got into things and we try to incorporate a musical theme to start the show, and it's just an interesting
Yeah, we have a format
exercise.
that works for us, and we always have music, and sometimes our guests choose them, and sometimes they'll say, music, I never thought about music. So then Dan gets to do it. So
So it's allows me to get creative and do things and learn new things because it's part of the journey, right?
It is part of the journey, man. And I love the smile that you have on your face. I love to see you guys interacting like that. And listen, heard about the work that you guys are doing, right? Because I wish there were so many more other people out there doing this work because we're needed. And I love the topic of, grief of the world. It made me think about a conversation I was having not too long ago about everything that's been going on. And how the whole dynamic and attitude of how people are starting to treat one another. And I was going, what happened?
right.
We used to treat each other with respect and compassion and empathy. Yes, granted, you will come across a few people that you may not get along with. That wasn't very nice or something, but it wasn't to the magnitude that it is now. Right. And now if I wanted to check out that episode, where would I find that episode at?
It's posted on Spotify, and then it gets added on to Apple,
all
Google,
places that have podcasts. We turn all of our radio shows into podcasts and post them on all the podcasting. Well, I don't know if it's all the podcasting formats, but most of them.
Yeah,
Spotify,
the majority.
Apple, and there's a couple more.
Yeah.
So just search for Monday Morning Conversations with Nancy and Dan on Spotify, and you'll find it. And then it's listed as a title.
Another interesting topic, and I think one that really deserves a lot of focus, and I hope that it gets is our youth. We've had a couple of shows.
We had 3 shows on about. We've had 4 shows on about grief in children, and one of them was us talking about it, and then the other 3 were people who actually work with young adults or kids or something like that.
Some local, some out of state, and one of the best things that I did to help me on my journey was to work with children who had lost parents and had lost grandparents.
Oh, wow.
And it's another quick story. So we were living at Frederick, Maryland when our loss occurred. And one of the first things that I did was to volunteer for a grief camp that is sponsored, by the local hospice, inviting kids to come in and talk about their loss and go through some exercises to kind of help them open up about how that loss had affected them. And in the introductory course that they had before we actually met the children, we were asked to introduce ourselves. And so I introduced myself, and why I was there was the loss of my daughter spoke to me about helping others and helping kids. And the guy behind me, when he introduced himself, said, "I knew your daughter, and that's why I'm here." And that just spoke so strongly to me that I was in the right spot at the right time doing the work that I was meant to do. And that led to my involvement in several other grief camps along the way. And to see children who arrive and have that mask on that I am here by myself. I don't know what's going to happen. No one knows what's going on inside me. And Sunday afternoon, when they're ready to go home, their whole smiles on their faces, and I'm not alone.
And they're kids again.
And they're given permission to be kids again. And it was such an uplifting, feeling to do that work and to be involved and to support, kids, teens, whoever, to understand that they aren't alone in walking a path, and that we're really meant to help one another.
Right. So I love that. And you guys have a website. So if someone wanted to donate to your organization or to, support the work that you do, how would they find you?
Our website is beingwithgrief.com. They can find us there. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. Being with Grief is the Facebook and the Instagram pages. So those would be the best ways.
Okay. And I always ask my guests, we got a question for you. Lakaya, she's been a huge supporter. I'm going to put her comment up here. I think this is a comment for you guys. She asked, what's the best thing about being a grief worker?
It's helping others to realize that they can find meaning, purpose, and joy again, and the aha on their face when they realize that they're not alone.
Right. I love that.
Yeah, that's for me.
Yeah, and I'd have to say the same thing, that knowing that there is what I like to do is, there's a moment of choice. You can choose to stay stuck in your grief. You can, but if it doesn't serve you, you can make the choice to ask yourself what's next, and be open to the possibility that there is something, and you don't have to hold yourself back. For me, that was the aha moment that brought me to the point where I said yes. And I think that was another thing.
Seeing those moments in the people that you work with is the moment for you.
And what it goes back again to where we were making the decision that we were going to do this work together. We are willing. Show us the way.
Yeah.
And we just put it up there on the altar and said,
Yeah, because we just started working together 2 years ago. Before we did our individual work, and we wanted to work together, but we weren't quite sure how it was going to happen, and that's what we did. We put it out there on our altar, and all of these things started conspiring to bring us together and doing the work together. So yeah, it's trusting that we're well taken care of. I always have been.
See, I love that, man. I definitely love that. I'm looking forward to being on you guys' show too, man. It's like this, you guys got me all excited, man. And it does my heart good to have met such wonderful people, right? That share something so horrific, but have found a way to turn this into such a beautiful journey and help serving other people,
Yeah.
And I look forward to meeting and knowing a lot more and learning. Right? You know what I'm saying? I'm still a pup in this game. I'm still a pup in this game, right? But I'm not afraid to admit it, right? You know what I'm saying? As my mama used to tell me, boy, you still wet behind the ears, right? So, I humbly bow down and say, man, wow, you guys inspire me to want to do more and be better, and to explore my own humanity as I go along this journey, so I can become more authentically who I'm supposed to be. Right.
Yeah. That sums it up.
The reason we're here, right?
That's the reason that we're here.
Yeah.
And with that being said, I want to say thank you guys for being on the show today and sharing your journey and the work that you're doing. Thank you for the conversation. A difficult conversation, right? You know what I'm saying, about child loss. And you guys helped me to make these conversations possible.
Yeah. Thank you for doing what you do.
And for the invitation to be here today. It is conversations don't, and any kind of conversation, whether it's talking about the problems of the world or the sorrows that we face, or just being human and compassionate to one another. It's inspiring. It fills your heart when you can walk away from touching another person and having them and feeling that you've been heard and that you've authentically heard somebody else share their spirit. We are spirits in a physical world, and boy, it is a blessing when we can touch.
It's very true. As we all learn along this journey, our goal is to have the best possible human experience while we're here, to touch and uplift as many people as we possibly can. And if you've experienced the life and the challenges that we've experienced, I think in a lot of ways it's our duty, once we figure it out, is to reach back and grab the next person and go, hey, I don't want you to struggle the way that I've done.
Yeah.
Take what I've learned, even if you don't use it all at one time. Stuff some of it in your pocket, so when you do need it, it's not a matter of when or if you're going to need it. It's a matter of when you do need it, you have something. And this is my contribution to your journey, right? And hopefully they, in hopes that they get to a place to where they can reach back and educate the next person. Because it's going to be a whole new, different experience with new tools and resources.
Right.
And hopefully they find it in their heart to pay that forward as well.
Right.
Yeah, pay it forward. Yeah.
So, thank you guys again. And for everyone who's been tuning in, like thank you for the comment. For everyone who will be tuning in, their information is going to be down below. If it's not already there, I will put it down there. Guys, reach out, support them. Go to their radio station, check out their interviews. I've checked out a few of them, so I didn't say that at first, right? But I have checked out a few of them, and I love your conversations. I really do. And with that being said, you guys, thank you for the support. Thank you for always encouraging us to keep having these conversations. And this is going to conclude another episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast, and we're having another one coming up. So you guys, we love you. Thank you. And until next time, you guys keep your head up in peace.
Thanks.